Would you join with me for a word of prayer this morning? Loving God, open our hearts and minds, and may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. You are our rock, and you are our Redeemer. Amen. A little bit of Thanksgiving humor to begin this morning. There was a preacher who was asked to go and speak at a church for the Thanksgiving service, and this church was known for being cheap, tight-fisted. And so the preacher went, and after he gave the sermon, he thought it was a good sermon. He took his hat off and he passed it around to collect the offering. And when he got his hat back, he looked at it and noticed that there was nothing in it. He even shook it upside down to make sure nothing fell out. And he said, "Okay, let's bow our heads for a word of prayer." And the people looked at him and thought, what in the world is he going to pray for? And he said, "Dear Lord, I'm thankful that these people gave me my hat back." There was a lady in a small-town grocery store, and she was looking through the frozen turkeys, but she couldn't find one that was big enough to feed her entire family. And so she asked the stock boy, "Sir, do these turkeys get any bigger?" And the stock boy was a local college student known for being a smart aleck, and he said, "No, ma'am, these turkeys are all dead." One more for you, and then we'll start here. There's a story told about an elderly man who lived in Phoenix. And 2 days before Thanksgiving, he calls his son in New York and he says, I hate to ruin your day, son, but I have to tell you that your mother and I are getting divorced. 45 years of misery is enough. We're not staying together anymore. "Dad, what are you talking about?" the son says. He says, "We can't stand the sight of each other anymore. It's just not working out. We're going to get divorced. We're sick of each other, and I'm sick of talking about this. So you call your sister in Chicago and you tell her the news." Well, frantic, the son picked up the phone. He called his sister, and she says, "The heck they're getting a divorce. I'll take care of this." She calls home to Phoenix immediately. She screams at her dad, and she said, "You and Mom are not getting divorced. Don't do a single thing until we get there, and we'll be there on the next flight." And with that, the man hung up, and he looked at his wife, and he smiled, and he said, "Sweetie, they're coming home for Thanksgiving, and they're even paying their own way." Well, Thanksgiving week is here. Ready or not? This week, families will come together. They will travel thousands of miles to be with loved ones. In fact, how many of you are going to be traveling outside of Nashville this week? A pretty good number of you. Thanksgiving, it's been said before, is that one time a year that we travel across the country thousands of miles to be with our loved ones, and we figure out that once a year is more than enough. That's what Jay Leno said. But we'll all eat a lot of food. We'll all watch some football. We'll get up early maybe on Friday and go fight the crowds to get a jump start on shopping for Black Friday. But hopefully we will take some time to stop and to give thanks to God for all the things in our life for which we are grateful. If you read the Bible is absolutely full of scriptures that talk about the importance of giving thanks, that talk about the importance of thanking God for our blessings. Phil read Psalm 100, "Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to God and bless his name. For the Lord is good. His steadfast love endures forever, and his faithfulness to all generations." Psalm 107, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His steadfast love endures forever." So many of Jesus' teachings talk about being thankful. Do you remember the story in Luke's gospel about the 10 lepers, all of whom were healed from their dreaded disease, but of the 10, only one actually went back and gave thanks for being healed? What happened to the other 9? Why were they not grateful? Their lives were changed. They were healed. Why is it that we so often fail to be grateful and appreciative? And what does this lack of gratitude do to us spiritually? I think these are important questions to wrestle with in the days leading up to Thanksgiving. Years ago, I heard a minister give a talk about the importance of staying spiritually grounded in life, which I think everybody would agree is a good idea, something that we all strive to attain. But he also talked about a category of people that we should try not to become a part of. And the category of people he was talking about, he referred to as ontologically disappointed people. Ontologically disappointed people. What does that mean? That means that they are always negative. They're always complaining. They're never satisfied or grateful. Enough is never enough. There's always a problem or a burden. Life is never fair. They always get the raw deal. And unfortunately, there are far too many ontologically disappointed people living in our world today. These are the people who have a difficult time seeing the good in life, seeing the positive in life. They are not optimistic about the future. They are not at peace in their own hearts, and they take that out on other people. They're not thankful for what they have. Last week, I mentioned a number of books to you that if you're trying to help understand what's been going on in American politics, these books are interesting. I said that there's The Unwinding by George Packer, Strangers in Their Own Land by Arlie Hochschild, The Populist Explosion by John Judas, and Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance. Well, this past week I read Hillbilly Elegy, and it's a very interesting book. It's a memoir of a guy named J.D. Vance who grew up in rural Appalachia, first in Jackson, Kentucky, and then in Ohio. His father was mostly absent. His mother was a drug addict. And fortunately for him, he was largely raised by his grandparents, Mama and Pawpaw, that he talks about all the time in the book. And they moved from Kentucky to Ohio in search of a better life in the Rust Belt. But J.D. Vance knew what it was like to grow up poor, to be a hillbilly, to have very little. He knew what it was like to have family members addicted to heroin and opioids. He knew what it was like to feel hopeless and to feel like he didn't have a future. He knew what it was like to feel scared and afraid. To summarize this book, and I don't want to ruin it for you in case you want to read it, but thanks to the love and support of his grandparents and a few other people in his life, he made it through high school. He then decided to go and join the Marine Corps. And after a period of time in the Marine Corps, he attended Ohio State for college. And as he grew older, he slowly began to feel that he was rising above the hillbilly class from which he came. He was one of the first in his family to go to college. And then something even more shocking happened. He was admitted to Yale Law School. And the book is a memoir of his life, and it's received a lot of attention this election cycle because it tells the story of the disconnect between the hillbilly class, the blue-collar class, and the elite class, between the people who live in the Rust Belt and they're struggling to survive and those who live lives of affluence and luxury. And one of the things that's happened in this country is that the ruling elites, political elites, both Republicans and Democrats, have lost touch with the blue-collar workers and their plight. They've lost touch with the struggles of working Americans, and that has clearly led to this populist uprising that helped elect Donald Trump as president. Now, there were other factors involved in this election, but this election has shed light on these two very different pictures of America. The haves and the have-nots, the blue collars and the elites. And J.D. Vance has given a personal account of what it feels like to exist in both of those worlds, to see the difference between those two worlds, to see the hopelessness and the fear that many people live with day in and day out. The truth of the matter is, many of us who are blessed in life with food and with shelter and clothing and financial security, we often fail to stop and give thanks for our blessings. We live in a capitalistic society that is driven and competitive and always focused on achievement and success. And there's nothing wrong with this unless it gets you to a point to where you're never satisfied and you can't acknowledge the basic blessings that you have. And of course, there are many reasons why we fail to acknowledge our blessings. As I think about it, I think about the fast pace of life. We live in a world that's fast-paced, and it's only getting faster. People are always busy. I'm so busy, but busy doing what? Technology plays a role in this. Lots of people are not thankful because they never slow down enough to look around and see what they've been given. Then there's a sense of entitlement. Tony Jarvis, in his book With Love and Prayer, says, Europeans often comment on how Americans expect life to be good to them, despite the fact that many people in the world are hungry and homeless, despite the fact that most of the world's population do not live in a democracy or enjoy material advantages and opportunities for education and advancement. Americans tend to take so many of these things for granted, he says. In other words, we have come to feel entitled to the good life. Enough is never enough. And we forget that there are people all over this world who would only dream to have some of the things that we call problems. And this sense of entitlement keeps us from being thankful. There's also unrealistic expectations on every level. Some people are never thankful because they always feel like their life is lacking. They always feel like they deserve more or bigger or better. There was a great article written by Harvard psychiatrist Armand Nicolai Jr. years ago, and it's called Hope in a Secular Age. And in it he says, the cause of despondency in many today is an awareness of a gap between what they think they ought to be and what they feel that they are. There's a discrepancy between an ideal that they hold for themselves and an acute awareness of how far short they fall from that ideal. You see, lots of people are not grateful because they have unrealistic expectations for their life, for what they think they deserve, for what they think they should have. Tim Keller says that one of our problems, and we've been talking about this in recent weeks, is that we turn to counterfeit gods to give us what only the one true God can give. We turn to money and power and status and politics and even to other people to give us what only God can give. But probably, perhaps, the primary reason that people, and I include all of us, that we fail to be grateful on a regular basis, I think, is because we're afraid. We're afraid of the future. We're afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of what might or could happen to us. Simply put, many people in our culture live lives that are full of fear. And I think this is especially true in an election year where things have been very vocal and hostile and divisive. Fear abounds. And people are scared, and sometimes they don't even know why they're scared. That's what anxiety is. Anxiety is fear of the unknown. You know you're afraid of something, you just don't know what it is. But being afraid is no way to live. Being afraid is the opposite of how Jesus tells us to live. Being afraid is not living in faith. One of my favorite books of the Bible to read this time of year is Paul's letter to the Philippians. In fact, I'd recommend that you read it this week. It's only 4 chapters, short chapters. You can read a chapter a day starting tomorrow and read chapter 4 on Thanksgiving Day. But this letter was written when Paul was in prison, and he didn't know what was going to happen. He didn't know if he was going to be killed. He didn't know if he was going to live. He didn't know if he was going to be released. He was in a situation where he had every reason in the world to be afraid, to be scared, to be fearful. But yet this is what he writes to the Philippian church. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. Do not worry about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And if you do this, he says, the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. You see, Paul was convinced that no matter what might happen to us in life, no matter what we might go through, no matter what heartache or tragedy or shortcoming, things are never so bad that we can't stop and give thanks to God. He continues, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence and if there's anything worthy of praise, then think about these things. Paul knew that we choose our attitude in life. And since our lives on earth are short and we don't even know how long we're going to be here, then why do so many of us choose to focus on the negative and the bad news and the things that aren't good? Why do we get so just enveloped with things that are wrong and things that are eating at us? Why can't we focus on what's good and what's pure in life? Paul's not done, though. Just a few verses later, he says, "Not that I'm referring to being in need, for I've learned to be content with whatever I have. I know what it is to have little, and I know what it is to have plenty. In any and all circumstances, I've learned the secret of being well fed and of going hungry, of having plenty and of being in need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Do we let Christ strengthen us in our lives? Are we open to that? Do we allow that to happen? Paul has identified one of the greatest secrets in life, being content with whatever you have. It doesn't mean that we stop working hard to move forward, but we stop wishing that we had more and we start appreciating what we do have. It's the everyday things for which we should be grateful. It's our families, it's our spouses, it's our children, it's our grandchildren, it's the house that we live in, or the cars that we drive, or the clothes that we wear, the food that we eat, the things that so often in Western culture we tend to take for granted. So my prayer for you this week is that as you travel, as you gather around the table with loved ones, I hope that you can take a few minutes to stop, to slow down, and to count your blessings. Nothing gets done Thanksgiving week. You guys know that. Slow down a little bit and count your blessings. Give thanks to God for this thing that we call life and for all that we have in life, because it's very difficult, and this has been proven, it's very difficult to be afraid when you're being grateful. The two don't go together very well. I want to close with these words, and you can call this a Thanksgiving prayer. The words of a poet. "Thank you for the gift of life, for letting me be me, for all that I can know by words and all that I can see, for all the music I can hear and all the songs I sing, for all the joy that comes to me and all the joy I bring, for all the food that I can taste and all the sweet scent smell, for all the loved ones I can touch who love and wish me well, for all the beauty of the world ever fresh and ever new. I don't know whom else I can thank, and so I'm thanking you." Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. Amen.